Well, good morning, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. Thanks for being here and contributing to what I feel is a really worthy cause for this board, and I know you all agree or you wouldn't be sitting here with me. So a couple of reminders that we do live stream this meeting so that the public can view it. So when you're speaking, just need you to make sure that the green light is on your microphone and speak into the microphone, and that way people out in YouTube land can hear what you have to say. We are scheduling a 10-minute break somewhere in the meeting, so you can plan your coffee and biological breaks accordingly. I won't make you sit here the whole time without a break. We have some exciting announcements about new folks joining us on our board today. So I want to start with Deb Knoll. Raise your hand so everybody can see you. Deb is the Assistant Commissioner, and she is the designee for Commissioner of the Department of Education, Penny Schwinn. So we welcome you to the board, and thank you for participating with us. And then we also have a new designee, Sharita Allen. Raise your hand. And she is representing the new commissioner for the Department of Economic and Community Development, Stuart McWhirter. So Sharita, welcome and thank you for being here and joining us. Look forward to your contributions. We have a couple of new board members. Natalie Alvarez, raise your hand. Hi, Natalie. She is joining us and she is the director of ALDER, which is a social civic organization of private sector business leaders. I got the chance to hear a little bit more about that earlier today, and I encourage you to do the same. It sounds like a great organization, and I know she's going to be a great contributor to what we're trying to do here as a board. And then Jason Schmidt, there he is, and he is the CEO of Old Time Pottery. And he's based out of Murfreesboro, but I also got a chance to meet with him last week, and just really has great vision for what we're trying to do and understands what our mission is. And so I'm excited about all of those new participants to our board. So make sure you welcome them either at the break or right after we're done meeting. And then you may have heard a little something about the man sitting next to me, and he has been a tremendous helper to me in understanding what it is I'm supposed to be doing on this board. But he has been the commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development since January of 2019, and he got about a year in before the bottom fell out of employment in the state due to various circumstances. But what was tremendous was his leadership through that in rallying the troops and the staff and all of the folks that had to pull that together and provide benefits to folks and guide them through. And now we're back to better than before, and I just really think that Commissioner's leadership through all that is one of the key reasons we were able to do that. So just his tireless efforts in all of the workforce initiatives and what he presents to the legislator, he's just been really, really engaged, and he just has an unwavering commitment to the residents of Tennessee and trying to keep them employed. So let's honor Commissioner McCord. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take your time. Very good. Looking forward to seeing the work in your new role, because I know you'll be just as dedicated to that. It sounds like an exciting opportunity, and I just figured, now that you're a little more relaxed today. You said, never mind, I don't have to wear a tie.
By the way, I have a hard time saying legislature, too.
Very good. All right. What else have I done? I think that's it. It's time for roll call, Eiler, so I'll let you take over from here.
Good morning. As I call your name, please use a microphone to confirm your attendance audibly. If you are a member of a local workforce development board, please state the local board. If you are representing by proxy, please state your name for the record. Natalie Alvarez,
Present.
Martha Axford,
Present. East.
Brandy Faust for State Senator Paul Bailey, Assistant Commissioner Jay Baker,
Present.
Jason Bates, and he is here. Tim Berry,
Here.
Joey Barnett for State Representative Clark Boyd,
Here.
Deputy Commissioner Sherelle Campbell-Street for Commissioner Clarence Carter,
Here.
Michelle Falcone,
Brittany Carbo, proxy.
Ben Ferguson, Bill Godwin,
I'm here.
Marshall Graves,
Present. Southeast.
Ann Hatcher, Rick Isaacson,
Present.
J. Paul Jackson,
Present.
Commissioner Jeff McCord,
Present.
Vonda McDaniel, Director Sharita Allen for Commissioner Stuart McWhorter,
Present.
Mayor E.L. Morton, Policy Director Tony Nicknajad for Governor Bill Lee,
Present.
Stuart Price,
Present.
Barry Ray,
Present.
Jason Schmidt,
Present.
Assistant Commissioner Deborah Knoll for Commissioner Penny Schwinn,
Present.
Kyle Spurgeon, Jeff Vance,
Present.
Kevin Vaughn,
Present.
Rusty Vi,
J. Paul Jackson, proxy.
Ron Wade, Assistant Commissioner Kevin Wright.
Present.
Chairman Barry, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Eiler. I appreciate that. I trust that everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting, and I will look for a motion to approve those as presented. Motion made by Kevin, thank you, and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Bill. And any discussion about the minutes or questions? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner McCord, what do you have to tell us? What's been going on?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I think very quickly, we as an agency in conversations in partnership with other agencies had some discussions lately about, okay, if we had one super priority or a North Star, what would that North Star be? What can we rally around? And really that continues to be labor force participation. Unemployment rate's great. It's kind of a false flag number a little bit, but that's what everybody understands. But that labor force participation rate is key, because what that means is more citizens are engaged in the economy. And a lot of good things happen, a lot of bad things don't when you center a life with a job. And so everything that the agency does in partnership really is pushing towards that labor force participation rate, which includes safe working environments, as well as the proper training and education to advance in the workforce. So anyway, I encourage, as I exit stage left, to continue to think about that and think about ways to plug into that, both in actions and in words. And so it's a good rallying cry, not just for labor and workforce development, but for the state as a whole. We have raised our labor force participation rate to the highest, and as we're well over 61, headed for 62. If we get to 62, that will be a 20-year high. So that is what the department and the agency is pushing towards. We haven't been over 61% in two and a half years. And so progress is being made, and economic conditions will come and they'll go. But we're going to continue long-term to have a labor supply issue, and the way to solve that is getting more citizens engaged in the economy. And then briefly, also, I want to thank this board. I remember meeting with Tim and a few other folks at Monell's. And if you eat enough at Monell's, you have an out-of-body experience. And so we had a little out-of-body experience. Too much fried chicken and mashed potatoes and collards. You got to have the collards. And we talked about what we wanted out of a board. And we talked about obviously support, but also challenge, to be honest and speak plainly and call us to do better, because you, along with your fellow Tennesseans, pay us. You're our bosses. So it's kind of like the Holy Spirit, both comforting and convicting. And I really, really believe this board is at a place that can do that, and shoot straight, and work together with honesty, but not finger pointing. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of this board through hard times and good times, and have that kind of level speak and honest talk, but also incredible innovation along the way. So with that, Chairman, I'll give it back over to you, and just one more time say thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I think that is a good summary of the work that this board does, and the staff that you have is just tremendous, and appreciate everything they do. Okay, prior to this meeting, we had some committee meetings, and we want to hear reports from those meetings. So if we'll start with the Oversight Committee, and Martha Axford, who is the vice chair, if you'd give us any updates from what you folks
Thank you,
discussed.
Chairman Berry. We had a very calm meeting this morning because we had no policies to vote on. But I am going to ask Brian, who did a little oversight, Brian's in the back, who did a little overview of what this committee is about. And he was so easily communicated all the, I'm trying to think, and he didn't use very many acronyms. And so I asked Brian if he would give us just a little 2-minute overview, because I think we have so many new board members that understanding, Brian is back here, understanding where our funding comes from and how we use it would be beneficial. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. So we had an excellent discussion this morning. I think it was very productive, and it was very amicable. We discussed a lot of things we'd like to see for the future, but there were 5 main things we covered today. First thing would be the fiscal review. So usually we just review our budgets for the year for workforce services, which encompasses WIOA's Title I and III. WIOA Title I being adult, youth, and dislocated worker programs. It's about 50% of the funding we receive each year, so it's a considerable portion of what we receive. Adult education and vocational rehabilitation, we also provide an update regarding those. We also reviewed our Smart Simple Grants Management System. It's a system that the subrecipients, I know some people don't like the term subrecipient, but our grantees use to submit financial reports and updates regarding the activity they perform on any number of grants they receive from the state. So an update on that is operationally, we've kind of resumed full-time operations. Areas are submitting reimbursements, reports. I think a lot of the areas think it's a much better and improved system from its predecessor. So good things are on the horizon, although there is definitely a need for training, and that is something we're going to emphasize with the local areas to provide ample training regarding that. We also covered KPIs. I believe the Innovation Committee also discusses KPIs, but in sum, we did an excellent job for program year 2021. One of the highlights is our Justice Involved KPI of new enrollments. We actually enrolled over 4,000 individuals who are justice involved this past year. Our goal was about 1,700, so it's a 200% of our goal. So we did an excellent job, and I know there's a presentation later with APDS, one of our great highlights regarding that. Also, for another one of our highlights is, or really our concern is changing service delivery model. So because of COVID-19, a lot of American job centers, their doors were shuttered, and that results in the local areas having to kind of come up with a more innovative practice of how to reach participants. So that is something that I think Ivan's going to discuss later today about how it could be a concern, and just making sure that we're not engaging with participants, particularly in rural areas. And then lastly, Justin provided an update on the policies, which was an excellent update. He knocked it out of the park. Essentially, all of the policies are being updated. We're going to condense it and make it more legible, easy to understand, so that it's kind of in line with the federal regulations. And then in addition to that, we'll release supplemental guidance, which is where we can provide input on what are some best practices that can be employed. And that's the updates for oversight. So I appreciate the kind words, Martha.
Thank you, Brian. Just to wrap up, the Oversight Committee stressed to our support staff that we want to focus on results and the ROI going forward. So we're going to do some additional training with our committee and spend some more time to make sure that we are focused on results as we move forward. And that concludes our report.
Thank you very much. Any question for Martha or Brian, maybe? Okay, thank you, team. I appreciate that. All right, next we're going to hear from the Operations Committee. Stuart Price is the chair of that committee. What happened in your discussion today, Stuart?
Okay, we had a great meeting this morning, presentations from 3 work groups, and I'll start with our Apprenticeship Work-Based Learning Work Group. Matt Spinella and Holly Friallard gave us an update on their progress, and it is significant. I'll start with, they have some overarching goals that are target deadline dates of June of '23, and one of them with apprenticeship programs is increasing them by 20% by that date, and then on work-based learning, increase the number of participating programs by 50% by June of '23. Typically, they submit, they do give us an advance report for us to review. That report, unfortunately, is never accurate because their numbers are increasing so rapidly. So we had to update them again, which is awesome. They have 6,431 apprentices. That's up from 6,142 last quarter. And then on work-based learning students, they have 38,372 participating, up from 35,864 last quarter. This work group's on track to meet its apprenticeship goal and has already exceeded its work-based learning participation goal. There are 31 Tennessee certified pre-apprenticeship programs. Some highlights over the past quarter: Komatsu signing on an apprenticeship program. Nissan has opened up to a broader accepting minors into their program, their work-based learning program. And then a highlight of Music City Construction actually reaching out to the SNAP program to engage with them, offering employment training for all who receive SNAP benefits. We had some feedback from the board around engagement and some input to the team to consider a broader social media platforms. Currently, they're focused on Facebook and LinkedIn, and so there was some comment that perhaps they could be a little more contemporary in their reaching out, and they acknowledged that's the case.
Very
so that was great input.
That was diplomatic, Stuart. Thank you.
Actually, too, they highlighted the East Tennessee's model around this. There's great integration between the workforce boards and the local industry agencies, whether it's AGC, ABC, that type of thing, that these local business groups are tightly integrated with our local workforce boards, and that's reaping great benefit. And so there's something there for us to consider moving across the state to translate that to Middle and West Tennessee so they can get the same benefits. So we're going to take a look at something around maybe some recommendations there. So anyway, they're doing an awesome job. We received an update from Eric Horton on the Business Service Work Group. They've had some change in leadership. Ann Thompson has moved out of the leadership role and is being replaced by Jenny McCabe. And so with that change, they're taking a step back and reevaluating their charter. They want to make sure that it aligns with today's need. And so it's specifically around that. They're taking a look at representation in the employer advisory committee of small businesses. They're seeing that there may not be enough representation in that group, and the charter may need to be changed to reflect a greater emphasis in that direction. So they'll be convening on September 10th to involve the employer advisory committee. It's kind of hard to say too, isn't it? Yeah. And so with that, they'll get, they're seeking something that has more accurate representation of what the need is out there. And so we might see some change in their charter to reflect that. And then we received an update from the Job Seeker Work Group from Carla Garrett. Between the last meeting and this meeting, they have circulated to the committee for feedback a workforce resilience plan. The purpose of this is to try to decode for our workforce, our people out there, our workforce who are engaging with the programs. And there are 8 different agencies that are involved as part of the workforce resilience plan. Fundamentally, it's there to try to help our job seekers understand what's there and what's available for them and how to engage and how to take advantage of it. We had some good discussion around the plan. Largely, there was a sense that their timeline is too ambitious for the scope of what they have to do. And so we have given them a couple of weeks to come back to us with a revised timeline that affords them some the correct amount of time for them to come up with something that is going to end up being useful to all 8 agencies that are engaged with it, rather than trying to produce something on a faster timeline that may or may not be as good and comprehensive as we would like for it to be. So that is the takeaway for them. We didn't have any policies to recommend for the broader board consideration. So.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like some good presentations. Any questions for Stewart or that committee? Okay, hearing none, we can move on to the Innovation Committee. Kevin, what happened in your discussion today?
Thank you, sir. We had a lot of good discussion this morning also. We didn't have anything to be voted on. We did have a lot of great speakers this morning. First off, Mr. Rastogi with the WIOA work group told us about the job seekers and the workforce resilience plan. And what that is to increase the convenience for the Tennessee work seekers to look over 8 different agencies and be able to see where that service is or what service they have to offer for them and what the location is for them to go to that agency. Mr. Allen talked to us about the federal report card and the performance measures, how to look at that dashboard and kind of read over it. It's into different groups for your adult measures, your dislocated worker, youth, and Wagner-Pizer. Then we heard from Mr. Ben Pacinio. He talked about the Kpis. So Tennessee did very well in the program for year 2021. They achieved the status for their target achieves or best programs for 7 out of 12 program-specific measures. Tennessee's not negotiated the targets for program 2022 yet. We're waiting on guidance from this will be forthcoming, refining program-specific measures, and Workforce Services is working with other departments to align the KPI policies. The subject matter experts are expected to meet quarterly with the local workforce department areas and respond to their needs in order to hit their collective goals. We're looking forward to the creation of the cross-programming measures along with the wired that align with the board's call to action, increasing labor force participation and decreasing government dependency. We're looking forward to hearing more in our next meeting from Mr. Ben on that. We also heard from Carla Garlett. She spoke about the Title I youth best practices. Additional sources for funding leads to more people being served in that area. We also heard from Marla Rye. She spoke about the Northern Middle's success with the jobs for the Veterans Program and how they related to the Fort Campbell area. And that was the conclusion. Well, we actually needed some more time, but we had to kind of rein it in a little bit.
Well, thanks for keeping them on track and on time this morning. So what questions do you have for the Innovation Committee or Kevin? Okay, it sounds like some good discussions this morning, so thank you for your role in participating in each of those committees. I thank you for that. All right, we've been, yeah, please.
So just to provide some context about what was just said, so when we talk about workforce participation, labor force participation, we have 2 million of 7 million people on public assistance. Even if we get 10% of those who move off of public assistance, that goes a long way for labor force participation. We have 200,000 military members transitioning to the United States every year, not including spouses. Those are typically higher unemployment rates than the general population, which seems silly. And connecting to them better is part of the strategy for increasing labor force participation. 500,000 working age Tennesseans do not have a high school diploma, typically disaffected from work. Connecting to that population in deeper, better ways to work is a strategy that's going on for labor force participation. Reentry, of course, is part of that. And then, of course, the teaching, getting high school, 16 and 17-year-olds involved in work at an early age is a longer-term goal that will teach them about work and that work it, and maybe they get it at home, maybe they don't, but the intrinsic value of a job, and as an agency, we talk about that being a pre-entry program as much as a workforce development program, because again, if you center a life with a job. So a lot of kind of bullet point ways that we can talk about connecting to parts of the population that we haven't been able to, or not haven't been able to, we just have not connected as well as and as efficient as effective as we might have with the higher ed population, post-secondary population. And so building those connections in a easy, meaningful way so we can get those folks engaged in the economy is when we say labor force participation is the North Star. All those things roll up to connecting that population. And one of the things I think as you move forward, you know, we have this calamity of we can't find people, but there's so much opportunity in that calamity to connect these populations and to, again, both socioeconomic, both cultural advantages to connecting those populations that weren't with pathways to the economy, to economic prosperity. So thank you for letting me preach for just a minute. And so I just, as we talk about numbers and individual initiatives and everything, I think it's also important to have the context and what are we aiming at. And these are the things that we're aiming at. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely, well said, thank you. Any questions or comments to commissioners? Yes, Marshall.
So I'm really fascinated by looking at the numbers in our committee, and Kevin pointed out, you know, where we focused in the board, we see success. So justice-involved people, we see success. Youth, we see success. one of the things that was pointed out in our committee is, for instance, the seniors programs. So we're not doing very well in that area. And it's a very small piece of the overall pie. So I just say that out loud because I think maybe the board needs to focus on that area a little bit. Because to your point, it's a combination of all these things that gets us to where we need to go. And that seems to be an area where we may not have put enough emphasis over time.
Good. Any other questions or comments?
Chairman, I'll iterate what
Please.
we said in the committee. $7.50 for that program for seniors is not enough to pull them off the couch.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Okay, we've been working with UT and we essentially had an evaluation workforce of what we do, and Assistant Commissioner Plale is going to give us an update on that. So tell us what we found out about all the questions we've been answering over the last month.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chairman Barry, and thank you, Board, for allowing me to be here and speak on this. This morning, Steve Plale, Assistant Commissioner here at the Department of Labor and Workforce Development, oversee the Division of Workforce Services. I have with me this morning, he's actually going to be the bulk of the presentation, Executive Director Paul Jennings. From the University of Tennessee. I'm repping my orange today. We're only a week away, less than a week away from football time in Tennessee, so I had to do that. Go Vols. I digress. University of Tennessee Center for Industrial Services has been working with our division and the department to kind of figure out where we are. Understand the landscape, understand the workforce system as a whole. And Chairman, I've been here for a little over a year in this role, and one of the very first things that you charged me with, or this board asked that we evaluate, was our system. Where are we? What is the health of our system? What does it look like? Not only from a division of workforce services, because that is the division that, as was mentioned by Brian earlier, primarily oversees Title I and Title III, but also what does that look like for our partners? What does that look like for our local workforce development boards? What does that look like for the state board? And potentially crafting, drafting, developing a evaluation, a certification process for the state workforce board that could then be used as a model for our local boards. We contracted with the University of Tennessee Center for Industrial Services to conduct that, and I'm excited to bring up Paul to spend the next few minutes talking about what they discovered through their process, through their research, surveys, their interviews, and then some recommendations for how we can move forward. So, Paul?
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And Chairman Barry, I heard that you run a pretty tight schedule, so I scripted this out to make sure I stay within time. Commissioner McCord, nice to see you again. We really appreciate the opportunity to share what we've learned over the last several months, and then present our thoughts on how we might move forward. Before we get started, I want to recognize Tamerfield Parsons, who's back there. Tamer's been our lead researcher on the project and has done much of the heavy lifting as we've worked through these interviews. Let me see if I can get this to work. Which one? This one? There we go. My job today is really to give you a brief background of what we're doing, talk a little bit about the key themes, and then offer some recommendations, some things for you to consider as we move forward. We've also prepared a handout that you should have, which supplements our presentation and provides a little more detail. Well, the purpose of the project is really to review, as Steve alluded to review current workforce services division operations and recommend how to best accelerate continuous improvement across the workforce services division and also the broader statewide workforce system. To address this purpose, our team has reviewed numerous documents, including the 2019 Ernst & Young report, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We've interviewed over 80 Workforce Services Division employees, either individually or in small groups. We've also interviewed 6 local Workforce Board directors and 3 state Workforce Board members. Also, we've recently completed a survey of Workforce Services employees, receiving 187 completed surveys for almost 70% response rate, which is quite impressive. And over the next several months, we hope to conduct additional surveys and interviews, primarily more at the local level. Now, the people we've interviewed have been very open, very transparent, very forthcoming, very helpful. We've learned a lot in a short time. I'll share some of the key themes in a few minutes, but first I want to present a simple diagram which we feel illustrates the situation for Workforce Services Division in the larger workforce development system. You can see this shows the distribution of responsibilities in an improvement-oriented organization. Frontline employees are responsible for the operations and are the face of the organization for customers. They're that direct interface that you have for customers. Now, this works well when policies, processes, and expectations are clear, they're systematic and understood, and the employees are consistently onboarded and trained. Then at the next level, directors and supervisors are responsible for driving improvement. They can focus on improvement because they trust that the front line has the information and the resources they need to manage operations with minimal oversight. In other words, those on the front line are equipped to be successful. Senior leadership is responsible for driving strategy and innovation. They can do this because frontline employees, directors, and supervisors have clear direction. Everyone has what they need to do their job. So what happens when this is not always the case? What happens when those working with the customers don't have the training, the clearest of direction, consistency, or resources that they might need? Basically, everyone jumps in to help. Senior leaders, directors, and supervisors, all with the best intentions, all with expertise, they move down into operations to help on the front line. This help may be a physical presence, but more likely it's in the form of additional calls, multiple questions, emails, emergency requests, policy directives, memos, etc. People on the front line use words like chaotic, stressful, overwhelming, unsustainable to describe their work environment. Now, this is not uncommon. You see this in many organizations across the country, and I bet everyone has experienced it in some forms. I've experienced it at all different levels, in all forms. We particularly see this emerge in organizations as the result of emergencies, like a pandemic, significant policy or organizational change, periods of high turnover, or all of the above at the same time. So does any of this sound familiar? The problem is once this downward migration starts, it doesn't stop on its own. As they say where I grew up, we just sort of keep chasing our tail. An organization needs to take proactive steps to make needed changes. If you could think of the Workforce Services Division and the larger system as a ball of twine, and right now it's wound incredibly tight with some complex knots here and there. We need to figure out how to unravel it while continuing to serve customers and address federal and state goals. It's quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge. This diagram shows where we want to go. With a culture of visionary leadership, which you have, valuing people and customer-focused excellence, along with a broad systems perspective, your frontline customer-facing employees can manage operations while also offering ideas for improvement. Directors and supervisors can support operations and focus on improvement. and senior leaders will spend most of their time on innovation and planning, occasionally dipping down into operational areas to learn, coach, mentor, and express gratitude. With this in mind, we found several significant strengths that provide a good foundation for future improvements. The key story here is that the people in the workforce services and throughout the workforce system have a deep, deep passion for serving their customers. Their desire to improve the workforce development system is rooted in their passion to help job seekers and companies succeed. I can't emphasize that passion enough. It comes through every interview. The customer focus is so strong. We also know that people continue to find ways to assist customers. We heard the metrics today. People are helping customers. Sometimes it's difficult, but they're able to get the job done because of their long-standing relationships, strong, knowledgeable supervisors, some STAR programs, and again, their commitment to service. And again, we know that people across the agency and the system, they all want the workforce system to improve. They know things could be better, and they want to help make it better. Their fear, which they expressed to us for numerous times, is that they're so busy and feel so overwhelmed that nothing will change. And that's another challenge. There are several opportunities for improvement that are rooted in fragmented work groups, philosophical differences between states and local entities, and then the entities often functioning in silos. Other opportunities for improvement include unclear policy interpretations, sporadic process improvement efforts, metrics without appropriate context, and sometimes undigestible communications. And of course, the pay level is a significant problem throughout the system, particularly in the lower parts at the local level. Let's turn to a few key recommendations that will build on the strengths and address opportunities for improvement. The first overarching recommendation is to transform the culture and equip board members and senior leaders to lead it into the future. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. I went several. There I am. Sneak preview. Thank you, Jim. So what do we want to do first is transform the culture and equip board members and senior leaders to lead into the future. So what does that mean? First, we want to develop and implement an approach to board certification. A draft outline of what this would look like is in your handout. We want to initially implement the board certification process with the state board. We would follow that up with pilots in 1 to 2 local boards, and then we would make adjustments as needed and then apply to other boards across the state. Certification would be modeled on the Baldrige Performance Excellence criteria, modified to address your specific needs. It would address operational requirements, ethical behavior, onboarding, professional development, member evaluation, and other areas as the board deems appropriate. A second initiative would be, I'm back here again, would be developing and implementing an ongoing leadership development program for current and future leaders. The program would include training and project-based learning in systems thinking, cultural change, leadership, and workforce programs and policy. We would initiate the program within workforce services before opening it up to leadership across the workforce system. Over time, this would create a common language and common body of knowledge within the agency and across the system. A second overarching recommendation is to adopt and implement a systems perspective across workforce services in the larger workforce system. The first thing to do is very basic, but critically important, and that is to define and reach a common understanding of key customer groups and work group responsibilities. We found in our interviews that there's not always agreement and clarity about who key workforce services customers are. So we have to achieve customer clarity throughout the system before we can begin defining work processes and then aligning customer responsibilities. Wow. Oh, it does. Okay, but I ended up in the right place. A third overarching recommendation is to integrate a model for excellence and approaches for improvement and innovation via the new Office of Workforce Strategies and Operations. We view the WSO that's being developed within the Workforce Services Division as a performance excellence team that will move performance improvements forward. We envision a team that advances improvements through facilitation, collaboration, training, learning, piloting, modeling, and leading. It cannot be a command and control team that's preparing directives and adding one more thing on people's plates. But we're talking about training, learning, piloting, modeling, and leading. WSO initiatives might include, over time, gradually facilitating the adoption of the Baldrige Framework for Excellence, or a similar model, developing and deploying onboarding and other professional development initiatives, leading strategic and annual planning processes, developing new employee and customer engagement metrics, and assessing impacts of organizational policies. Now, as Workforce Services implements these recommendations and unravels some of these complexities, we'll see people and teams who are now reacting to problems gradually align and move in the same direction. The firefighting and reactive activities in the top illustration will increasingly reach the optimal stage of integration in the bottom illustration. That's the goal. Now, I mentioned the Ernst & Young study earlier in the presentation. The Ernst & Young report has many good recommendations, and some of the recommendations we're making are similar to what was made a few years ago. As Workforce Services takes steps to align the arrows and build greater trust across the system, we feel that the organization will be better able to implement some of those more transformative Ernst & Young recommendations as they work through and get those arrows in alignment. So I've talked a lot, and the question always is, well, how do you start? What do you do first? And how do you make sure that we move forward and it's not static? You know, what we're talking about is a long-term approach. It involves developing people, prioritizing improvements, and implementing them in small, manageable steps. That's the only way to do it while you're also trying to serve your customers. Every performance excellence initiative needs early wins. I suggest we start with board certification and leadership development. That will position the organization to define and improve key processes and develop onboarding and professional development programs. I suggest you consider focusing on these projects very hard over the next year with the goal of having them operational within the year. So this will prepare the organization to adopt a performance excellence framework and prioritize additional improvements. Within 3 to 4 years, as the department implements additional improvements, we'll see momentum build as the arrows align. By then, continuous improvement and performance excellence will be part of the organization's fabric and part of its culture. So, Steve, that's what we have today. So I'm available. Of course, we can answer questions now, or I'll be around afterwards, too, if anyone wants to talk.
Well, if you would, Paul, just hang out with me for just a moment. I will just add a little bit of additional context to this research and what was presented. Some of these recommendations, I think, validate the work that we're already doing in Workforce Services and across the agency. The intentional focus on training, the one agency model that has already been implemented here at the agency. Has been in place now over the last several months that is helping to drive this training and development of our staff so that then we can take that and go and work with our local board staff. We have additional trainings that are coming up. If you remember last year, we had our first large-scale workforce convening that we'd had in several years. We are doing that again this fall. We're doing that regionally. And more information will be shared on that with the board as we finalize that. I can share the dates with you if you want to know that, so I'll do that here in just a moment. But the research that UTCIS has already conducted and the interviews that were done, the surveys, the additional surveys that are going to be working and coming through, I think validate some of the things that we know that we need to improve around. And we can move forward with training not only for our staff, but for local board staff, for our local board members, for state workforce board members, and really move in an aligned direction as a workforce system as a whole. So I just wanted to add a little bit of that context. But any questions that the board, if we have a few moments, Chairman?
Yeah, we do have some time here, so I would imagine some of you were part of the interview process over the last several months, and so I'm curious to see if you feel what is presented kind of captured what you were hoping to get out of the evaluation. So what questions do you have about the recommendations or what you think might be missing from what you were hoping to see? Yeah, Rick?
I would just like to commend the work product. You can really see the right focus and attention on the right things. The only thing I would think of is the commissioner who just talked to us about basically mission, vision, and purpose, and starting with that North Star definition, then defining the strategic initiatives, which are right here. And you've done a great job in a list, right? Once we have the initiatives, I think the board could add value saying, in the team, what are the top projects? And the final factor, who owns it? And you define the top project as management development course, which is fine. But what are the top projects? And we call it in our business, one throat to choke. One owner of each project, because if you don't have accountability and, time, dates, objectives, things don't happen. They just, because it's beautiful work. It's much like the Ernst work, which is incredible. So kudos to all of you for rallying around this. But I think just a little bit of top-line development would be so productive here because we're seeing good progress. I'm hoping others are. And this can just really align that progress and accelerate it. It's great, great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Commissioner?
No,
Oh.
I'm sorry, I just think one throat to choke is pretty funny, actually. That's what I was, and I do want to say, there's a lot of infrastructure already, so it's, for those who don't know, the state of Tennessee is not a civil service model anymore, it's a performance management model. And when I first started, it's very similar to what I encountered at Eastman Chemical Company. So it's a Fortune 300, really performance management based. So the infrastructure's there as well. I do know also that the state as a whole will do some of the work that your team's already done, Steve. So I commend you for being ahead of that curve. And they'll probably have another wave of surveys for our folks who will have to do. But there's a lot of pieces there already, and it's a matter of assembling. And I agree completely in assigning, who's the owner of this. So, the throat to choke, I guess, as well. So, thank you for the work, Paul.
Yeah, Sherelle.
So this is phenomenal, and kudos. It's really great. And what's interesting, Kevin and I are over here having this sidebar conversation because you can really overlay this with a lot of the work that is going on in the Department of Human Services. As Commissioner mentioned, we serve 2 million plus Tennesseans each year through our department, and we have a little over 4,000 people, and if you don't get the culture right for those people, those services will not be right. And I just love how we are looking at this, but it really, when you sit here at a different department and see this, it tells me that this could probably be a state of Tennessee model that we need to look at, because if our department, which is I think the second or the third largest, and we see ourselves in this, I bet you other state departments as well will see themselves, and maybe this is more of a collective impact study in which we look at state employees and the leadership training. All of these things are happening in siloed pockets, I believe, but to me, it just seems like this is a bigger discussion about state government community, and it definitely about the attraction of new people and the sustainability and retention of those that are here. It's no longer the employer of choice for a lot of people, and we have got to be strategic and agile in looking at things differently. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm just, it's like I'm looking in the mirror.
I'll respond to that just real briefly. So and also to Commissioner's comments. I think this study, a lot of this was workforce services, the division, heavy. We have to start somewhere, and we do have to have an owner of this work. We do have to have somebody who can take this banner and run forward with it, right? So workforce services as a division is focusing on that to be kind of a pilot, potentially for the rest of our agency, and then maybe ultimately for other agencies across state government. So, but we got to start somewhere. We got to move as a system, as a workforce system as well. So just an addition to that comment. I agree with you.
Other comments? I think my question is always about how we take recommendations to action. And it sounds like your team is already ahead of the game on some of those specific tasks. But, it'd be nice to say everything we're framing up as a task has, one of these recommendation goals in mind. So even at the convening, using these recommendations as a outline for an agenda.
Absolutely. So and I alluded to the convenings. The major theme of that convening is alignment, right? So as one of the recommendations was talking about common definitions and understanding, a common foundation and understanding around the system as a whole. That is one major focus of the convenings, is around that alignment of the system overall, right? So multiple agencies are engaged in the system, multiple partners, local areas, and their partnerships that they have at the local level. Alignment is critical, right? So that is one recommendation, that is one focus for those convenings. I would also say, another kind of taking those recommendations and putting them into action. We would present to the board or submit to the board. This is something that you would like to pursue, Chairman and board, a draft of the certification and what that would look like, potentially bringing that to you in November. So there is some idea, some thought of what it could look like already in your packet, but actually having a formalized draft for you to get your thoughts and feedback on coming in November.
Yeah, and thank you for that supplement in the pre-read materials, because that was helpful to dig into that a little more. Yeah, I think, clearly if one of the next steps is let's get the certification going, then I would think absolutely at the next meeting, let's see what that might look like. And give us give this board some action on what we need to do to keep progressing that. It seems like alignment has been a common theme because there's so many agencies, and with all those agencies, it's hard to find one throat to choke, right? And so because everybody has a little bit of a dog in the hunt, right? And we have to get those dogs on the same path. But because of so many agencies, it's hard to then decide, well, who is it that really owns it? So I think in that alignment, we need to be diligent about, not just talking about, because everybody agrees we need to be aligned for efficiency, but actually getting there and then accountability for that alignment is where we need to finalize.
I agree with you, and I would say to the board that I think that is part of your role as a board, is to serve as that master convener of what that alignment looks like across our state agencies and across our different partners and across the local workforce boards. So setting those expectations, I think, that's a great opportunity for the board as we move forward and in this process and as we focus on our super priority around labor force participation rate.
And so I would, challenge this board then to say, as we call for that alignment and we see everybody on board with that, then we use the metrics that we put toward this. And if we see that anybody's out of that alignment, or, if each of the agencies will be honest enough with the board to say, look, we're all in agreement here, but we got one who's not participating very well, or we got one that doesn't seem to be, doing their share of the work to keep us all the most efficient, then they can come to us and we can hold that team accountable to make sure everybody's on the same page. Is that fair? Okay.
Last thing, I mentioned this, and I want to just make sure I give you the dates if you'd like to take this down. Like I said, we'll send more information. We have invitations and save the dates coming out for our workforce convenings. But as I mentioned, this year we are doing a very regional focused convening. We will do 3, one in West Tennessee, the West Tennessee Grand Region, Grand Division. Those 3 local workforce development boards, Northwest, Southwest, and Greater Memphis. We will be doing that convening October the 5th and 6th at Pickwick Landing State Park. Really excited about that 2-day event. In Middle Tennessee, so Northern Middle, Southern Middle, and Upper Cumberland local workforce development boards, we will be at Montgomery Bell State Park. That will be October the 12th and 13th. And then in East, the Northeast Board, Southeast, and East, we will be in Knoxville at the Knoxville Convention Center in November 8th and 9th. Like I said, more information will be shared, invitations, and save the dates will be coming out very soon. Actually, save the dates should be coming out maybe by the end of the day today, but definitely the first part of next week to save those dates for folks, but then invitations as well. If you're available, if you would like to attend, we would love for you to attend in your Grand Region, the area that you represent, State Workforce Board. We would love for you to be a part of that process and a part of those convenings. So just want to make sure that you're aware of those.
All right, any other questions? Steve, thank you. Paul, thank you. Appreciate your time. Okay, I promised you a break. Now's the time for that. Let's come back here at 12:14. I'm sorry, 11:14. Don't take that long of a break. I'm still on East Tennessee time, so yeah, 11:14. See you then.
Sure. So I know that we've all heard of Blue Oval City, which in West Tennessee, with Ford coming alongside. Of course, just like anybody's concerned, their major concern was workforce development. And so, in case you don't know, what we did is multiple agencies put together an in-region team to start addressing and working on the workforce development piece before Ford came in and after Ford came in, and partnered with a bunch of different agencies. But the person who is the throat to choke on this particular one is Heath McMillan. Can you stand up, Heath? Where'd you go? Heath McMillan. And I've known Heath a lot, and I've choked his throat before when we were working together. And so Heath will lead that workforce development effort in conjunction with multiple agencies. And then at the end, when the TCAT's constructed, the Blue Oval City TCAT, he will assume the role as the president of that TCAT. And so he'll have 2 or 3 years of deep relationships with both Ford and the community before he moves into that role. So let's make Heath welcome.
Thank you. Look forward to getting to know you, Heath. Our next presentation is from Adam Henderson and Mott Middleton, and we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say about reducing recidivism through employment. So come on up and tell us what we need to know.
There we go. There you go. Let me restart. Thank you. I'm Adam Henderson. I am VP of Sales with APDS, and I have my coworker Mott Middleton with us. We've been working with the state of Tennessee through Department of Labor, Adult Education, and Office of Reentry on Project REAP. And we've had a few planning sessions. So wanted to meet with everybody here and kind of give an update of where we are and what we're doing and what the plans are kind of going forward. So we heard the term APDS earlier from the Operations Committee. So APDS is a certified B Corporation. So everything that we do is tied back to a social mission of ending the revolving door of corrections through a career pathway to employment post-release. We do this at no charge to justice-impacted individuals. It's all grant or state jurisdiction funded. So we truly believe in providing a hand up to individuals through education, rehabilitative content, and job skills. Everybody knows once a person is incarcerated, their access to education and employment diminishes greatly. So working on the whole human and being able to help the individual see a path to success once they're released from incarceration is a way to affect generational change in a state. So we provide a secure career readiness platform focusing on 3 key areas: the education, the mental health and substance abuse, rehabilitative content, and then career exploration and actually figuring out what you want to be when you grow up, in a path to actual employment. So currently, we started 3 jail pilots in 2020. In Grundy, Gibson, and Blount counties, focusing on these areas or these programs. Then we expanded to 17 more counties through Office of Criminal Justice Programming grants. And we're actually working with the Department of Labor now to go statewide to provide this programming. This is just what a student would be able to see, how they're able to, let me back up a second. So we do all this through a secure tablet. So we deliver it through a tablet where they can only go where they're allowed to go. So this is what a student would actually be able to see. So if they want to get into their financial literacy, they would go into Money Essentials and kind of learn the budgeting tools and different things. There's a lot of different things that are available that kind of come standard with what we provide. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of this, but there's a few key pieces. So virtual classroom, which is being able to instruct a class from here to any facility across the state. What is key for this group would be virtual interviews. So industry would be able to interview people while they're still behind the wire to, conditionally hire somebody, and, shorten that length of unemployment. So again, growing that participation rate within the state. There is, we have the learning management system. So industry that has pre-employment work or pre-apprenticeship work, all of that can be loaded into our platform, and all of that becomes trackable information. So the Office of Reentry or Adult Education will be able to track and see what's being done. The local facility staff would be able to, encourage people to continue to work through if you're working on Ford Blue Oval or Old Time Pottery or whatever. So be able to kind of go through and look at those types of things for employment. One of the key things that really differentiates us from a lot of other platforms in this industry is the data analytics. So we are able to show at a state level at any time the number of students that are engaged, what they're engaged with, how they are working through all of the different programs. So at any time you can look at a state level and then you can drill down. And we're working with Latoya to set up the way we want to have the department wants to be able to see things geographically throughout the state. And then you can drill down to the individual. So if you are working through a platform, Latoya can sit here, drill down, and be able to see exactly what you're working on and provide encouragement through the platform, through messaging and different things. And one of the really good things is the student they can see this themselves as a motivational tool, so they can see the transcripts, just like you were if you were in post-secondary or high school. This is showing the different modules that you're working on, the time that you spent on it, and we'll soon have the success path. So, you've done so many lessons successfully in each course. So this is kind of where we are across the state. So the lime green shows the three pilot sites plus Dyer, because Dyer jumped on board almost immediately. And then the Office of Criminal Justice Programming. So these are we're all launching, most of these are launched at this point. We still have a few sites that we're waiting for some network infrastructure. And then as we plan to roll across the state, this is how, through the planning sessions that we have had, how we're kind of going to look at things. We're going to start in West Tennessee, then jump east, and then come back to the middle. Rolling out the tablets, the platform, and the programming. I mentioned engagement tools. So there's messaging for staff and resident and staff, and we can also, the jurisdictions can allow industry to communicate. Virtual classroom for virtual interviews. There's a number of different tools that are built into the platform to allow industry to communicate with individuals and work on the pre-employment or pre-apprenticeship type programs. So the ecosystem that we've kind of built out through our planning sessions is we're going to take a universal state ID, which would be that Jobs for TN, the Department of Labor number. Then as that individual is behind the wire, work on upskills, and then create that path to employment. And then that affects generational change in the state. One thing I will say, this is the first program like this in the nation. LaToya and I have coined the jail to employment pipeline. And it is the first one that we know of in this state, or in this country. So this is an incredible program that you all have put together. And you're a national leader in looking at pulling in the different resources and the different people involved to lay this out for this population. One of the things that we want to engage with this group is working with you to design the communication to the local workforce boards and to employers. How do we want to, we have the education piece, we have the reentry piece pretty well laid out. We have the path to being able to track everybody across the state. We want to engage with you on how we're able to engage industry. We've had some superficial conversations with a few people in Middle Tennessee with interest. DC Thomas and I met a few months ago, and she wanted to have that message also come from the state level on how we can communicate from all of you down to the grassroots, essentially. And that's really what we're trying to, the next piece to figure out. That was really fast. So I heard we're on a time limit. So if questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I mean, the results are tremendous, but I would love to open this up to the board and see what questions that you have for Adam or Mott.
I have a question. So, and this is really because I don't know. I probably should know, but I don't know. Why is Tennessee the first? What is it about Tennessee that makes it the first to do this?
It's a great question. And, when LaToya and I first started talking about this, I'm like, why hasn't anyone else thought of this? It's Tennessee's unique in one aspect that labor handles all of the education in the jail settings. Once you get to jail settings, it's very fragmented, but having one State Department oversee all of that piece is key. And then and you're also the first in the nation to have an Office of Reentry under labor, which is huge. So having those two pieces is key, but working with the Department of Labor that knows industry, what the job market's going to look like 3-5 years from now, when people are going to be released, and we can plan the programming and the pathway accordingly. I think that's the special sauce. But yeah, so that is going to be, not anybody has looked at it that way. So.
One of the things that we are doing in the vocational rehabilitation program is trying to be more involved with those that are justice involved. So I had two questions. One is, have you all been looking at resources for those with disabilities? So when they become behind the wire and move in front of the wire, they have opportunities and know what they are, particularly around employment. And second of all, I'd like to have more conversation about that. So what are the ways that we can connect?
So, great question. So I'll answer number 2 first. Oops, there's us. So using technology, there are ways to help individuals that may have special needs or disabilities. There are limits to what a tablet is able to do. We do have the speech detect, where the screen readers and those types of things. We can't do speech to text, can we?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So speech to text is an option, but more importantly than that is identifying the jobs that are available to that population pre-release and working with the agency to build a course plan to identify individuals who need those jobs in the future and can really hone in and provide a targeted approach.
Yes.
So we're expanding to all of the jails across the state of Tennessee. What about the penitentiaries, our state prisons?
So,
We're not there yet. We are not at the penitentiary level yet. We started with the jails, and let's prove efficacy and dive deep into the data and ensure that this program is driving the results that benefit the citizens of Tennessee before we take it further.
And actually, the jails are the tougher nut to crack. It just is, because you're dealing with 95 county sheriffs. And so the fact to take on that first is impressive. And so, yeah, I think the conversation with DOC after some success at the jail level, and I would make the case, and tell me if I'm wrong, that typically jails are underserved in the educational piece, so you have the greater need there in the first place, and then it's just harder with 95 sheriffs. Don't tell any of them I said that when I'm driving across the state, but it's not always easy as one agency.
I do have a question.
This just screams prison ministry. If I was wanting to scale that, even in Tennessee, so many of your jail ministries and prison ministries, those pastors and ministers they have people that are wanting to make a change. I saw the book, right? It's about from where you're at to a purpose in life. Those that have engaged with that ministry would absolutely love this tool to give them hope and help. I think you have it. It's just.
LaToya, what do you have to say about that?
Thank you so much. We have actually had a meeting with Dr. Monty Burks to engage the faith-based community as a part of this and integrate them with the tablet resources. So we actually had a meeting last week to engage with the organizations that are in West Tennessee, because again, we want to make sure that the success pipeline and training and education is provided, but we need a support system outside of the facility, and a lot of that already is happening. So we're not gonna reinvent the wheel. We're gonna further engage and build that network of success. So Dr. Monty Burks is helping us spearhead that piece of it so we can integrate that programming on the tablets as well.
Good. Jason, you had a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Again, thank you for your presentation. It's very, very informative, and it seems like it's beginning stages of some great success. The question I have is, there's a lot of focus on a lot of those employment skills, those soft skills, which I think is absolutely essential. But I guess the next question would be is there a phase to get into more of the technical skills? When an individual has completed their soft skill training, their employability screening, is there opportunities for them to get more of the technical skills that are really applicable for the jobs that are available?
Absolutely. And we have a pilot that is currently running in DC jails, where we had our first cohort sit for the Amazon Web Service certificates yesterday, and pleased to report on that we had 18 individuals who are now certified as Amazon Web Service practitioners. So we are connecting with industry like Cisco, like Amazon, and other nationwide providers that will lift individuals into living wage jobs and expand their horizon for career paths. So we are very interested in continuing to expand on the tech side because we see that as a growth area.
And tech is really important. I guess I'm thinking, coming from manufacturing, opportunities for more of the traditional manufacturing type of work, tool and die, additive manufacturing in the future, things of that nature.
We do have some of those certification programs built into the platform already. They're not part of the base programming that Tennessee's, looking at to purchase. But individual jurisdictions, so like if you're in Gibson County, for example, just because that's one of the counties I can remember, you know, that local facility would be able to add that content on, you know, because that's a path to employment. So we can do that individualized.
And I think I appreciate that, and I think the important thing there is getting those local jails to be looking at their community and where potentially these inmates are going to, once they are released, where they're going to be, you know, working and living, understanding what that industry needs are, and then utilizing that technology to make sure that they're helping them with the appropriate technical skills as well. So thank you.
You're welcome. And that's why we wanted to meet at the state level, so we can formalize these conversations and push them down to the local workforce boards regionally and whatnot, so.
So how's it working in Claiborne County with their jail population? How do you have a set number of tablets that sheriff inventories and
Yeah.
keeps control of?
So I forget.
Adult ed comes in, or who's forecasting the job availabilities in the local market?
Clayton, I believe, is just, Latoya's got her hand up in the back. Clayton is just launching. So they were part of the Criminal Justice Programming Grant. And I think we were just waiting on some infrastructure build. So the Department of Labor set the number of tablets, and they are, correct me if I'm wrong, Latoya, so adult education is going through the assessments for education and assigning the appropriate education programming. And then Office of Reentry and Adult Ed is looking at the workforce skills. And then we have a strategic account manager that will be engaging with the sheriff's office about employment opportunities. And then we'll start reaching out to local employers and having those conversations to bring them into the platform.
Another thing to add, that engagement, we have a specific meeting with those stakeholders in Claiborne County next week, because the sheriff did reach out, the adult education partner is in place there as well. And what we're looking at right now is a 3-to-1 ratio with the number of tablets that are going to facilities, but we also had the Office of Reentry conduct surveys to engage that initial, and Claiborne jumped on immediately and said, hey, we need this number, we need this number. But that adult education piece is definitely going to be that door opener, so we can ensure that that information is in our Jobs for TN system, so we can track long-term outcomes.
So, So quick question, how many participants are there currently in the pilot, and how many would you say are active, let's say, taking more than one course?
So currently, out of the pilot cohort that we had, and these were facilities that when COVID hit, the doors were completely shut down to program, and we lost 64% of our corrections enrollment across the state. So we had 124 individuals that were engaged and did over 800,000 minutes of programming across those 4 county programs. And I wanted to highlight specifically Gibson County and Blount County. We have had individuals from start to finish that went through that adult education program and have graduated with their high school equivalency diplomas. So we're currently working with those individuals in that transition phase to make sure that once they are released, they go into sustainable employment. But we have seen that model turn things around, where a lot of the sheriffs initially said, we see a tablet, that's a toy, but we're helping them to reframe that to say, if we're gonna have jails in Tennessee that are housing individuals, this is no longer 3 hots and a cot. We're gonna give you skills so you can't come back to these facilities, because it, again, creates that generational change. If you are at home, you are providing tax revenue for your area. You are also helping your K-12 students because they are not stressed out because mommy or daddy are not there. And you are a staple and a steeple in a community where you can go back and pull other individuals that are on the pathway there to help them turn it around. So this is why we are definitely stressing that this is the generational approach.
So you've also just witnessed why Tennessee is one of the very first in the nation right there.
Yeah, sneaking ahead to Ivan's presentation later, you know, we're looking at the KPIs that were included in our packet, and you look at the #1 performing program as justice-involved individuals. Our goal was 1,700 enrollment. We had 4,200. Essentially, can you attribute, how much of that can you attribute to this program?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. Do you,
Latoya?
off the top of your head?
Not right off my head, but
I won't hold you
I
to
want to
it,
give
but just
credit
an idea.
to Dr. Arnold and his team as well. The awareness level has definitely increased. I think a lot of the expectation was we were expecting people to come to us and self-identify. We have been very intentional about going to the community, expressing the need, engaging them and saying, hey, just because this has happened, this is not who you are, and we want to help you to move forward. So individuals have been a lot more vulnerable in saying, hey, I have this on my record, but I see that there's a pathway to help. And I am so glad that our governor got behind us and has supported us and has been a true face, and our commissioner as well, to help us say that we are a state that says we're not just a second chance, we're another chance, and we want to provide you the resources to be successful.
Great. Tony, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and thank you all for the great questions. Some of them preempted my question, but one note and one question, a note of just encouragement to continue exploring the potential for application in our state facilities. We've had some great integration with TBR programs and industry certifications that we're continuing to see progress on, and I think in line with that Amazon pilot in DC, I think there may be some opportunities down the road. My other question, my main question was, have we had any surprises, or are we far enough along to get a sense of what industry sectors are engaging more than others, and are there any opportunities for us to promote this amongst other industries that maybe are not as interested in this population?
One of the surprises that we've definitely seen is the construction industry. They are really want to engage more with individuals that are justice involved. But one of the concerns is definitely coming out and going into low-wage positions. We want to make sure that we create a vetting process where individuals can actually go in for sustainable living wages. If we don't meet that immediate need, individuals are highly likely to recidivate. So we've been in conversation with TBR. Lauren Salina, she is a rock star. We've been in contact with Laura Ferguson Mims under THEI with some opportunities that are there, but we're definitely looking at those short-term credentials because the jail population a lot of times moves really quickly, and we want to make sure that we are giving them short-term credentials that will lead them on to success. So we are engaged in those conversations with our TBR institutions, with our community college, to engage them in partnership with the tablets as well.
I think that's really clarifying and actually a really kind of encouraging take that you're having, because I think in these types of programs, it would be very natural for us as an organization to say, there's a job, let's just get you in the job. And I think being, even though it might hurt or reduce some of our short-term metrics, I think it puts the long-term mission in better focus to say we're going to apply a little bit of a scrutiny to the type of jobs that we're connecting these individuals with.
Absolutely, and we really want to highlight those employers that are felon-friendly and recovery-friendly, so we can have some of those conversations to make sure they're trauma-informed and we build that network of success that is long-term. So we're not just looking, hey, we want to get you a job, we're done, we're going to toot our own hump. No, are you staying there? What do you need to be successful in those areas? And it's helping us to grow our leadership capacity as well. So we're building out reintegration specialists that are going to help with that work under the adult education umbrella to help build those partnerships and engage the American Job Centers. So we are really using this product as a workforce system tool, not just an adult ed tool, not just a workforce services tool, but how do we engage the entire system to really impact that labor force participation rate in a population that was overlooked for a very long time.
How do you connect once they get out? I'm sorry to interrupt, but just the one thing you just said is with the short stay, they get used to the tablet, they start engaging, they start developing habits. You don't want to break that. What happens once they step out to that job? Can they still access the content to stay engaged?
By having that state ID number as a universal identifier, once released, they'll be able to go to the job centers and pick up where they left off.
They would still have access.
Yes.
Yes. And having that DOL number, we can track and make sure where they are so they can get in-person services as well, especially on their adult education umbrella. We're all over the state, so they can still engage online and engage in person.
And we've had a couple of meetings in northern Middle Tennessee Workforce Board. And there's some interest from employers there, manufacturing and different, types of employers. And we've all talked and leveled on it needs to be a sustainable wage because, if they can't pay their bills, they're going to go back to what they know. And, that affects everybody. So.
These folks sound like they're coming out their work ready, but many of them should still be Tennessee Reconnect eligible, I would think. Is there a way for them to continue the online participation for further certifications?
So we're part of a PLC that is engaging all of that. So Jessica Gibson was a part of that conversation. So we're building that out under that learning community group. We're kind of newly integrated into that because most of the work, again, was focused in the prisons. So Tennessee is unique because we're making this focus in our jails. Our prisons house about, of the 55,000 that were the beds that are available and currently incarcerated, about 20,000 of those individuals are in prison. You have about 35,000 that were in your local and county jails. So we are new to that conversation, but opening up that opportunity as well. So those discussions have already started happening.
Good, excellent discussion. Latoya, thank you so much for the detail and being such a champion for these residents of our state and getting them the opportunities that they need. And thank you for just great tools to make that happen. So thank you. Any other questions for this group? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. For those of you like me who enjoy numbers and KPIs, it's time for the man of the hour, Ivan Greenfield. So come on up here, Assistant Administrator.
Hey, good morning, everyone. And so there's been a lot of discussion about some of the things that are being presented today, but we're going to kind of take a quick dive into just our fiscal review for FY20, or PY22, PY21, FY22. So it's kind of overview of what we'll be looking at. I'll just jump right on in. So we just kind of look at our numbers for fourth quarter ending FY22. For funding that was authorized for our programs, those partner programs of workforce services, adult education, and vocational rehabilitation. We said total funding authorized of about $170 million, juxtaposed to about $160 million in expenditures. When we look at our year-over-year review, we see a declination of about $17 million in our authorized funding, and what you'll see is that that's mainly attributable to emergency assistance that we received associated with COVID-19. And so this slide is kind of self-explanatory. If there are no questions, we'll go to the next slide. Let's see, I was supposed to be using I was advised to use the laser, so I apologize. We'll Lady Commissioner. So let's try it. Associated, I skipped one, there we go. Looking at workforce services specifically, we see that workforce services saw about $89 million last year in authorized funding. Versus $79 million in expenditures. And again, you see in this section right there, that's where we see the declination of funding for year over year. That represented basically two initiatives, that $24 million. And here it's been dropped down to really just some state funding and a National Dislocated Worker Grant of about $500,000. And so that's continuing theme that we're hearing as far as declination of funding. You'll see some impacts on the service delivery or service delivery model here later in the presentation. We're taking a look at just participants enrolled. So this is like a rolling 4 quarters, and we see the dip in the 2 middle quarters there is attributable to people exiting. But overall, we had 13,274 served in our Title I WIOA programs for last year. Going on to adult education, we see that they basically had about 13.9 million. 12 less, they spent about $1 million less. They served about 10,360, a little bit down from last year. But overall, it's kind of flat, the numbers are, and their authorization and the funding that was expended program year over program year. Again, I'm supposed to be using this, so we'll get used to that. Looking at voc rehabilitation, when they look at their authorized funding, they're just basically looking at what was reimbursed in that period. So you're seeing that's why the 67 is equivalent, is an equivalent of authorized funding to what was expended. Ended up with about 11,286 enrollments. Cost per participant just over 5,900. So that's kind of the allocation of funding and expenditures associated with our partner programs. Moving into performance, which we've kind of talked a lot about. And so in our federal measures, we have basically 18 measures for our programs, WIOA programs. Of those 18, 15 of those are associated with our adult dislocated worker and youth. And you see that we had passing where we met or exceeded our target goals. 3 of those measures associated with our Title III program or Wagner-Pizer, and we had 1 measure that was below target. See, the target was 70%. The actual was 59.7%. And that's really attributable to those numbers. That cohort is in the period of when COVID was really the height of COVID. And so a lot of those numbers were kind of down or low as a result of that. And then you'll see all of those I used to do the table with all of the numbers, and then I see eyes doing a little bit of that. So we put the tables, the attachments in the back. And so you can see what those results are, the targets and the measures and all of that stuff at the end of the slide. So if there are no questions on this one, we'll go to the next. And so in the overall national comparison, Tennessee is, as you can see, of those 18, we have 14 measures that were in the 3rd quartile or higher, 4th quartile being the highest, 1st quartile being the lowest. And 9 of those 14 measures were in that 4th quartile or at the highest level across the nation in those federal measures. And again, those measures are also identified in an attachment there in the back of the presentation. So when we look at state-specific KPIs, there are 12 in total. 9 of them were at the 71% of target or higher. And we use an achievement ranking of 0 to 5 to kind of identify where the various programs are on that. And so that would be a 3 of 5. And so, again, 9 of the 12 are there. 3 are below that 71%. And of those 3, 2 are tied to co-enrollments, which have historically been low. They're starting to rebound. But that's why you see them not being able to meet the total there. And in any case, anything that's below that third achievement ranking, we go out, we provide technical assistance with the local boards to see if there are any issues in the way that we're delivering services or anything of that nature. And that's not the case with these 3. And then again, the actual rankings and other things are in the attachment at the end. So skipping on to from performance to some things that we're seeing as far as challenges. I'm going to start with the last bullet there and the challenges first. Declining funding levels, we kind of talked about that. So when we look at year 2016, our WIOA program received allocations of $60.4 million, right? And this 23, this upcoming, that number's declined to 43 million, right? And so that's like a 28% dip. And so we're seeing some impact in the way that our service delivery is occurring, and that we're seeing requests for AJC closures. We're seeing requests for specialized centers. We're seeing requests for access points because, again, just as a result of the declining funding and the fact that, people just aren't utilizing our system as before as far as coming into the AJCs, in-person visits and things of that nature. And so you've heard the emphasis on labor force participation rate, our goal being 65% by 2025. And so how are we working alongside our partner agencies, partner programs to develop measures that help us to achieve that goal of 65? When we think about opportunities, we talked a little bit about systems integration, having implemented Smart Simple for our workforce services program, but we're also working to implement that for our adult education. We've actually recently combined our fiscal reporting, fiscal functions for both programs, so that'll increase, consolidate reporting and create efficiencies in our reporting as well. And I talked about the systems integration piece. And everybody's been kind of touting this expansion with the tablets program as really being a tool that we can use to help move that LFPR needle in a big way. And it's been just a great investment as we've watched this now the third phase in this effort for the state.
Ivan, if I may, and correct me where I'm wrong, but it doesn't make any practical sense for during a labor shortage to start cutting funding to labor and workforce development, does it? And so there's obviously a misalignment of the federal metrics. And if I'm correct, just at a high level, most of the funding that comes into the workforce development system, public workforce development system, is based on economic metrics.
Yes, sir.
And the economy's humming along. And so we are talking to our federal delegation about this misalignment of metrics here. And to be fair, it's new. We are fairly new anyway. And so that it explains it, but it still doesn't make that misalignment. It's just going to be something that we're going to have to navigate through and overcome for the next little while.
Great point, Commissioner. Those are definitely aligned to unemployment. So as our unemployment numbers go down, our funding goes down with that. And also some livable wages income as well. That is what our funding is tied to. So as our economy improves, federal funding goes down. Yes. Great point. All right. And always, those are talked about tables in the bag. For those of you who like the visual, they're there.
Ivan, if you don't mind, if I could ask you a question. I've been chasing you on these data related to how we perform against other states, so I appreciate that. I think if we're going to be the best workforce system in the nation, we have to know how we compare to other states. I wonder if there's a way maybe in the future to actually look at some of these areas where we're in the lower quartiles and do some analysis on that, and is there some way to map that to labor force? There's some areas where we're not performing, as based on what you've shown me this time and last time. If we're gonna pursue this vision that the governor has, it seems like, starting where we're not performing is the place maybe to start. So I wonder if there's a way to do some analysis on that. I talked to you about this before. Some of it's how we report, some of it's the way we actually operate. Those things may be easy to fix, but there may be some other things that would be really interesting to know.
So if I may, Ivan, I think that's a very good point, but I would go back one step further. And we just talked about misalignment of metrics. Maybe we don't want to be the best in this particular metric. So what is that metric? Does it make sense for Tennessee? And there are metrics in TOSHA, for example, that we don't think the federal metric is correct. And so, there's that connection there that the board needs to talk about and say, does this really make sense for Tennessee? And so I think that's the first one. Where are we? What is this measuring? And are we okay? I know nobody's okay with being last, but if it doesn't make sense, you're okay with being maybe not in the top performance. So I think those two exercise steps would be a very good thing to do.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight. I appreciate that very much, because if there's something we don't want to chase, then let's not chase it. But it would be really interesting to understand where we are low identify them specifically, and then if there's this kind of color to be put on it, then it would be nice to know what that is.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Ivan, go to the one that lists, do you have that one?
Yeah.
You can pull up, one of the things we were talking about in the Oversight Committee is the ones at the bottom with the least performance, notice how few people that impacts. So we as a board might be saying, well, look, if we're not performing that and we're only impacting less than 500 people across the whole state,
Yep.
why are we even spending any energy on it? You know, and let's take that investment and mash the gas on and put it up into the other ones that are overperforming.
Right.
So let's keep doing well what we're doing well, and maybe let the things that aren't performing well, that really aren't impacting a lot of folks anyway, and let those drop off. Not that those residents aren't important. I don't want people to get the wrong idea, but if we can impact more people by, you know, putting funds where it's working, then let's do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And to your point, Marshall, you saw that that first or lowest quartile there is associated with that second quarter. Yeah, I know you guys don't like these terms, but entered employment rate that we said was down because of the cohort that it was looking at. And so that's everything else is in that third quartile or above. So.
Didn't everybody else experience that same problem, though? Yeah.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Exactly right. So, is there no other questions?
Yeah, what other questions do you have for Ivan? Good comment.
I actually wanted to ask one question that Rick asked in the Oversight Committee, and for this group, I saw cost per participant in a couple of them. Is there a way for us to get a standardized view of cost per participant for the different services involved so we can look at relative ROI?
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you. Okay. No further questions. I have just a couple of things to share. I want to make sure you have on your calendars our next meeting, which is Friday, November 4th. So please, please, please mark that on your calendars and make sure that you are doing your best to attend that. And then, of course, you heard Steve talk about the convenings, and hopefully if one of those is near your area and you're able to participate as a board member, we'd welcome you to be part of those convenings. So keep those in mind if that's a possibility for you. And then if you're a new member, there will be an orientation scheduled before the end of the year, and that's helpful so that you can hear a little bit more about the vision of this board and where we're trying to go. So hopefully we can get you to that orientation as a new member. Otherwise, I think we're going to be able to give you at least 20 minutes back, and I hope you enjoy that. Any other questions or comments? I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Martha.
Seconded.
JP. All right, I think, unless somebody stands up with a big objection, we're just going to go ahead and make that motion to adjourn be accepted. So thank you all for your participation, and thank you, Commissioner, for